At Capella University, learning online doesn't mean learning alone. You'll get support from people who care about your success, like your enrollment specialist who gets to know you and the goals you'd like to achieve. You'll also get a designated academic coach who's with you throughout your entire program. Plus, career coaches are available to help you navigate your professional goals. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
Unfiltered discussions. Unexpected guests. No topic is off limits, from sex and relationships to the human condition, personal anxieties, and so much more. The only talk show of its kind in the world. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
Happy Tuesday. Welcome to The Last Show. Here's what you're going to learn on tonight's program. What happens when parents get too involved in their kids' dating and love lives? I'm looking directly at you, Mom. Well, new research shows that even well-intentioned support or subtle meddling from parents can cause emotional turbulence between parent and child. In about 10 minutes' time, we'll look at how getting involved with your kids' love lives can quietly tear your relationship with them apart. I mean, maybe it's not that dramatic, but you'll definitely want to stick around for that. Afterwards, ghosting. It's that silent breakup technique where you stop talking to the other person. Most of us have either done it or had it done to us, myself included. And you're often left wondering, agonizing, thinking, did I get rejected by this person? Or are they just a little too busy? Maybe the door's still open. Well, psychologists have finally studied ghosting. It's not just speculation. And halfway through the hour, we'll explore why it hurts so much and why it keeps us clinging to false hope. Spoiler, you shouldn't do it. It is a thing to do. All right, someone special to introduce you to after this.
Want to be part of The Last Show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
And in news about this show, I, host David Cooper, will be going to the desert for a hippie romp festival called Burning Man this week. Starting tomorrow, we are joined by foreign correspondent Tony Five to discuss this. Tony, welcome.
David, are you banging on about Burning Man constantly? It feels now, this annual pilgrimage of yours is ridiculous, where you go into the desert, you take off all your clothes, you don't wash, you don't hydrate, you have dust in parts of your body that I don't ever want to think about, and it's full of equally stinky people.
The answer to your question is yes. We're just not sure what the question is. Now, Tony, you might be wondering what's going to happen to the show while you're on vacation. We are going to have...
Not at all. Not at all. I could not care less. So when you go off, I believe there's going to be a collective sigh from the people of Canada, North America, East America, and West America that you do not talk to them on air.
Again, the answer to your question, yes. But someone, a consummate broadcasting professional, will be filling in for me. And her name is Caitlin Green, and she is here on the show to discuss. Caitlin, welcome.
I'm just eavesdropping. It's really what I'm doing.
Good Lord, she's an actual woman. David, you never said you knew women.
Yes, I'm David Cooper. I know women.
He buried the lead.
Wow. Did you describe her as a consummate professional, David?
I did.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't go and do that.
What is going to happen on my show? I normally don't call it, that sounds so selfish, our show.
No, it's your show.
Okay, fine.
Well, it is your show. It's called the Late Show with David Cooper.
Fine.
In all fairness, it's
what
all yours. It's not with Tony.
Tony, I love you. What is the plan for while I am out?
Well, I think I might scare your listeners with some of my girly content.
Nice.
Yeah, do you like that, Tony?
Basically, anything you do, I'm with you.
Okay, great. I want to have some fun and frivolity. I also want to expand my horizon into your areas because I feel like you guys do a lot of science stuff. I feel like you do a lot of great conspiracy topics. I want to go into that lane because normally I reside in a world more dedicated to lifestyle, pop culture. I have a 3-year-old son. So my day-to-day is so different. So I am really going to parachute in and mess 50% of this up and then keep in line 50% of the time.
That will be 50% less messed up than we do.
And you're probably used to listeners, right? Is that right? Yeah, that's a different thing. Yeah, and also what's quite interesting, I am an avid conspiracy theorist. I believe everything to be true. I don't even believe in Canada until about 2 years ago. Do you remember, David, when you proved to me that Canada existed?
Sure, yes, to answer the question.
It was one of them things. I feel, Caitlin, that me and you, if you remember the Great Conflict in 1941 to 1947, the World War II, as they called it, I believe we're taking over Western Europe, and David is Eastern Europe, and we're going to take him out completely until he is no more, and he's going to be like France, and we will be like England. That's the way I see it.
Well, it helps that you're British.
Exactly.
It's from that perspective.
Quite the history lesson.
Yeah, it's wonderful. David, how do you feel about being replaced?
I feel great about it. I think Caitlin's going to do a great job. I think people are going to finally love this show for a couple weeks.
For the wrong reason.
For the wrong reason.
Yeah, and I feel Caitlin is doing some sort of community outreach program because she obviously is professional. I can hear it in her voice. She hasn't stumbled. She hasn't made a mistake. She knows what she's doing. And yet she's coming to fill for us.
Yes.
I mean, that was a statement rather than a question. And David is looking so forlorn. He's realizing that his whole career prospects are going down. We're teasing him so mercilessly, but he loves it.
Every time I hear your voice, Tony, I realize my career's going down.
That's true. Yeah, it's good.
I want to know how the heck you two connected.
Yes.
Like, how did this cross-Atlantic friendship blossom?
Well, believe it or not, I wasn't always a professional broadcaster.
Cue laughter.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, I'm currently not one. And I used to do a radio show on a busy street in San Francisco through a glass window where people on the street could see you. And I was blaring the show onto the streets using speakers. For some reason, we didn't get arrested. And there was a telephone mounted on the outside of this place where we did the show. And I could make it ring from the inside. There's like a button I could press. So it was like a reverse payphone. Remember in the 90s when you can call a payphone and who knows what would happen?
Absolutely. Drake just installed one outside of his mansion here in Toronto. Anyways, I digress. He's bringing them back.
See, you know things that are happening, but I did it before Drake. And so, yeah, Tony was just on vacation in San Francisco. He was a random stranger. And I made the phone ring. He picked it up. Boom, he was on the show.
Yeah.
Fast forward 8 years. Now he's co-hosting the show.
That's amazing. I love this story. Is this the first time you guys have ever told your meet cute story on the air?
No.
Okay. Sorry, I thought it was like...
I mean, I like the meet cute story. It was really the first year of our relationship. He felt threatened. His girlfriend wouldn't allow me like their numbers or anything. I used to tell him I would want to wear his face.
Yeah. So we also had a regular call-in number. When he went back to England, he would call every week and he would vaguely threaten me, but he was very funny. And my guest would always be like, who is this guy calling? And I suppose I was too vain to stop it. I'm like, well, I know this is like funny content, but he's also very scary. And he kept on wanting to mail me things and my girlfriend wouldn't let me give him our address. But eventually we got to know each other. And then he was in Los Angeles, like, I don't know, 8-9 years ago. I flew down there to hang out with him. And we had like a Jerry Maguire moment where I'm like, if I quit my job and go into broadcasting, are you coming with me? And he's like, yeah, I'm coming with you.
And I picked up a goldfish bowl from some random stranger's house and I walked out and I said, I am with you, David.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And ever since then, I've been with him.
So from unhealthy parasocial relationship to this. I like it.
There you have it. That's how we met.
It's been a journey.
Okay. So then you guys do this and then Tony, you go off and do your regular job, right?
No, I don't. I'm completely unemployed. So what I do is I just sit here 24 hours a day and then David just buzzes me in and I sort of talk. And then I go back to like my coffin, you know, like a vampire.
Yes, he has a day job.
Okay, great.
You nut job. Anyway, we are looking forward to having you on the show, Caitlin. Hopefully Tony will show up and speak with you while you're doing whatever it is that you do while you fill in. And that's it. I just, wanted to introduce you.
Okay, great.
Thanks for coming on the show.
I'm really excited to summon Tony from his coffin every once in a while. And Tony, do you watch any reality television?
Oh my God, do I?
Do you?
No.
Damn it. Come on, man.
Tony, Caitlin, thanks for being here. Tony Five is our foreign correspondent in London, England, and you can hear media personality Caitlin Green on the Jan Arden podcast or filling in on this very show, The Last Show, starting tomorrow night while I'm at Burning Man. Catch Caitlin however you're listening to this show right now, but just do it tomorrow. Coming up after the break, your mom loves your new romantic partner, or she hates them. Mom expressing a positive or negative opinion stirs up more drama than you'd think, and that includes just expressing approval. Up next, we'll look at research that says your parents, Mom, I'm looking at you, meddling in your love life can cause all kinds of problems, whether they like the person you're dating or not. I am David Cooper, and more of The Last Show in a minute.
In the 70s, 4 young women were found dead. For nearly 50 years, their cases went cold. I'm Nancy Hixt, a senior crime reporter for Global News. In the season finale of Crime Beat, I share how investigators uncovered shocking evidence of a serial killer and hear exclusive interviews with the killer's family. Listen to the full season of Crime Beat early and ad-free on Amazon Music by asking Alexa to play the podcast Crime Beat.
The only talk show with an introduction that mentions its own introduction. And that's happening right now in this introduction. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Begging for a mention. Yeah, you just want attention.
What happens when parents get involved in their kids' dating lives? Mom, I'm looking at you. A new study shows that meddling in your kids' love lives, even with good intentions, can stir up tension. But it all depends on how your family communicates and how much influence parents have on their kids. I'm here with someone who's done research in this area. His name is Dr. Paul Schrodt. He is a communication study professor at Texas Christian University. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. I'm glad to be here.
I love that you elected to research this area. I'm glad there's some real data that maybe proves things that we all know. But I got to ask this question to start. What possessed you to look into parents meddling in kids' dating lives?
Sure. So I had a student here at TCU. Her name is Emily Steger, and she had expressed some frustrations with some of her own parents' involvement in some of her dating relationships. And I was familiar with the theory that we used for this particular research, and I knew that the theory had mostly been applied to romantic relationships. But I got to thinking, the theory talks about how interference and facilitation from a partner can affect a romantic partnership in terms of feelings of instability and chaos in the relationship. And it got me to thinking, I wonder if parent interference and facilitation of their child's romantic relationship has similar effects for their relationship. And at the same time, I'm a father of 2 sons who are both in college right now.
Oh boy.
And I myself had experienced some conversations with both of my sons where they might perceive that I was interfering at times. And once we had that conversation together, we decided to do a study to explore these relationships.
What are some of the ways in which parents interfere, some positive, some negative in their dating? We could talk about your one student if she'd be comfortable with you sharing, but if not, just generally. What are some of the ways that you see in your research that parents do hinder or help in their kids' love lives?
Great question. In terms of interfering, oftentimes that involves, using guilt, or perhaps engaging in conversations with the child where you begin to express concerns about who they're dating.
Are you talking about my mother on purpose, or this is just, I'm just thinking this is about me when it's not?
Exactly. Some of the other ways that they can interfere is, basically arranging family activities in ways that prevent the child from being able to spend the kind of time with their partner that they might want to spend the time with. In terms of support, most of the research indicates it involves maybe giving advice on how to have a healthy relationship, maybe helping your child navigate their first big argument that they have with their romantic partner, inviting them to family gatherings and get-togethers, essentially trying to communicate that they're included in the family, in the group. And so depending on whether it's, interfering or supporting the relationship, it can have effects on the quality of the relationship between the child and the parent.
You'd think that hindering or interfering behaviors would have a negative outcome. You'd think that more helpful or supportive behaviors around your kids' dating would have a positive outcome. Is that what you observed?
In general, yes, although the effect of the supportive behaviors does depend on the kind of family communication environment that the parents have created over time. And one of the things that we found is that when families already have a high conversation orientation to the family, meaning they basically are open and free to talk about a wide variety of topics, supporting the child's romantic relationship and continuing to show a vested interest in that partnership, especially for emerging adult children who are kind of in this weird transition period where they're trying to gain more and more autonomy from the family, that continued facilitation can actually have a bit of a boomerang effect and create a degree of instability and chaos in the parent-child relationship.
Interesting. Can you say more about that or give me an example of how that might play out?
Yes. So one of the things that we found was when the child values the parent's opinion about the relationship, but at the same time, they're striving to gain more and more freedom and independence from the family, having a mother or a father continue to insert themselves into the romantic relationship is actually undesirable. It actually might create a situation where the child begins to feel that the parent is being controlling or overly intrusive.
Again, Mom. Sorry, I got distracted. Were you surprised by this? You'd think that supportive parents would just generally have a good outcome in a relationship. This seems like, it's kind of a corner case. You have to have a lot of circumstances play out. But were you surprised that under some circumstances, being overly supportive or quote unquote helpful actually had a negative outcome?
Absolutely. In fact, for us, that was one of the most surprising and noteworthy findings to come from the study. It seems counterintuitive. And we found that if you set aside the communication environment of the family and you set aside whether or not the child values the parent's opinion about the romantic relationship, well, then by itself, parent facilitation does usually produce a positive outcome. And, that support usually is welcomed in the relationship. But under that other circumstance, it can actually have the opposite effect.
Is there something a well-meaning parent can say or do that they think is supportive, but actually causes more harm than good?
Yeah, that's a good question because we didn't look at specific types of messages or specific types of statements. I do think it is more of an indicator of the overall level of involvement that the parent is continuing to try to have in their emerging adult child's romantic relationship.
Did anything in your research change how you might personally talk to your own kids who are about that age you're speaking about, or advice to parents for how they might talk to their own kids about dating?
Yeah, I actually, after we came out with the study, I actually sent it to my oldest son, who just recently went through a breakup this past February. And of course, he got a kick out of it because he and I had a few conversations about it. And I think that the takeaway that I took from it was that I really need to let him kind of figure his romantic relationship out for himself and, be here as a quiet source of support. And if you would like my thoughts or my advice, wait to be asked instead of continuing to pry and ask questions.
I think that's just generally great parenting advice. It's just funny that you came to it from a very academic lens. But
sure,
in general, I would say that's just good parenting advice, no?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You focused on the child's perspective here. If you ran the same study from a parent's point of view, what do you think we might find?
Yeah, that's a really good question because what previous research indicates is that parents have a vested interest in their child's well-being overall. And as we all know, a healthy romantic relationship or an unhealthy relationship can be a tremendous source of life-giving energy or stress and hurt. And I think a lot of parents have a vested interest as well, because this could be a future member of the family. As we all know, those of us who choose to marry, you're not just marrying your partner, you're marrying into the family. And so I think for a lot of parents, the question of who their child is pursuing a relationship with and might be getting involved with in a more serious manner has a lot of relevance for their own general stress level, health, and well-being.
Well, Dr. Paul Schrodt is a communication study professor at Texas Christian University. Paul, this has been a great chat. Thanks for sharing your research with me and some of these personal anecdotes.
Thank you, David, for having me on the show.
After the break, psychology researchers have cracked the code as to why ghosting, when someone disappears on you after a date, hurts so bad. We'll tell you all about that coming up next.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. When your therapist won't take your calls anymore, there's always the last show with David Cooper.
Ghosting. It's the silent breakup that leaves you wondering, agonizing, thinking, did I get rejected, or is the other person just a little too busy? But there is psychology research into ghosting, and researchers have attempted in the lab to find out why it hurts so much and why we can't let go. I'm here with one of those researchers. Her name is Amanda Szczesniak. She's a social psychology researcher at Wayne State University in Detroit. Amanda, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Why the curiosity into ghosting? I feel like this is something that gets talked about a lot in pop culture, but I don't know that there's been a ton of academic psychology research into it. So why the curiosity in this area?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, ghosting is becoming a very popular conversation topic. People often describe it as a very distressing way to experience a breakup. And this inspired us to explore what makes this dissolution experience particularly impactful. And there has been previous research done on ghosting in the communications field, especially. But this research often looks at retrospective reports or participants recalling past experiences after they know that they've already been ghosted, looking back on the experience. So we were curious on how do we look at ghosting? How do people feel in the moment? And how is this unique from direct explicit rejection?
Having been ghosted, it feels like an emotional gut punch, but I am wondering, why does it hurt so bad? And why does it hurt so much more than a simple hey, thanks, no thanks, or hey, that was a great bunch of dates we went on, but I'm actually not interested? Is there something that goes on with our brains when we get ghosted that's a little different than when we get cleanly broken up with?
Yeah, so in our work, we did find that when people experience ghosting, they do have that continued emotional attachment to their ex-partner or the rejecter, which then might make it more difficult to move on. So we do see that those who are ghosted have this similar negative emotions or emotional pain compared to those who experience explicit rejection, but yet there's still that continued attachment, potentially because we might still feel like there is a relationship to restore there. So that might be one of the reasons why ghosting is particularly unique, in that there's that uncertainty and that continued attachment to the ex-partner.
It's sort of like that you feel, having been ghosted, like that door is slightly open. Like if I only had one more interaction with them, maybe they wouldn't reject me. Is it something like that?
Yes, for sure. So previous research has looked at ambiguous rejection broadly in social psychology. And we do see that for those who experience ambiguous rejection, which ghosting would fall under, they do often feel that there is a potential to restore their relational value or their relationship with that individual. So seeking, a gain of that relationship with that ex-partner. On the other hand, explicit rejection, there's more of a focus on, that those ties are severed. Now let's try to go find social connections with other individuals. So that might be one reason why ghosting, in particular, that ambiguity kind of leaves that door open for, potentially restoring your relational value with that ex-partner, which is why we see, continued contact attempts and this emotional attachment continuing.
Interesting. How do we simulate this in the lab? Every situation I've heard of or experienced of ghosting seems different, highly personal, very much a product of that date that you went on with that one person in that moment that you matched on that app or whatever. But how do we simulate this in a lab? How do you study ghosting in a way where you can kind of make claims about it?
Yeah, for sure. So, as a social psychologist, we try to focus on the processes themselves. So, even though each experience might be different phenomenologically, we try to look at these underlying processes of what could be happening common throughout people. And so, to do this, we looked at ghosting experimentally in the lab. We had two studies in which participants initially joined the study. They were told they would be undergoing a hypothetical dating scenario, such as an online dating site, and we gave them four profiles or options of people to date. Once they selected someone, they imagined asking this target to go on a date with them. They imagined the target accepting, and we provided visual aids to assist in this. So, for instance, text messages of the interaction. We allowed the participants to select where they wanted to go on a date, things like that to increase their immersion into the scenario. And then after that, they imagined inviting the target or that dating partner out on another date, and they were then randomly assigned to one of three conditions. So the ghosting condition would be they were shown a picture of the text message that they sent to the potential partner, and they were told that 12 hours had passed without hearing from that target. In response to their date invitation. So they were kind of left hanging. The explicit rejection condition, the target simply stated they weren't interested, and the acceptance condition, the target accepted the date. So that's kind of how we compared those experiences.
Do ghosters know that it's kind of a lousy way to end things, that you're not giving people closure, that it's kind of unkind to the person? Or are some of the reasons people ghost, they're just oblivious, they don't know better, they're too busy? Or is there really a mix there?
I would assume the former. There is some research done by another lab that does show that people who have been ghosted in the past are more likely to ghost someone in the future, which seems paradoxical, knowing how negative and how bad it feels that someone's still willing to do that. And that is one avenue that I'm interested in exploring in the future, is looking at the motivational processes underlying, why do people ghost even though they know it doesn't feel good? Is it sort of a shift in these motivational priorities or these needs that one is prioritized over another, so we tend to ghost even though we know it feels bad for the other person?
Not giving that person closure. I do. What's your hunch on that one? I know you haven't done the study, and I know sometimes researchers don't like to give an opinion, but what's your hunch on the reason people ghost when they know it's not a great thing to do?
Yeah, so there are potentially two reasons. So, one is we know from research on relationship dissolution and breakups that rejecting somebody feels bad for the rejector because we know we're hurting the other person. So, in one case, we might feel like ghosting is an easier way to let someone down, less direct, even though we know it doesn't feel good. We might assume it feels better than direct rejection when we're the one who's doing the rejecting. On the other hand, depending on how that rejector feels about that relationship, if they're kind of on the fence about it, or if they're not really sure they want to sever those ties, ghosting might be a way to distance someone or distance yourself from someone without, fully severing those ties. So if you want to go back to that relationship in the future, that door might still be open. So there are a couple different motivations I'd like to explore there.
You studied ghosting in early stage dating. Do you think being ghosted after a long-term relationship, let's say a year or more, would have similar effects, or would it be exponentially worse?
I do think it would be worse. And I think the reason for that I speculate would be mostly our own expectations and social norms. So I think in the early stages of dating, ghosting is, even though we know it feels bad, it sort of isn't surprising. It happens so commonly. But for a longer relationship, I feel like there would be those expectations that your partner would give some, finality to that relationship, some reasons for why it's ending. And so I do think that violations of those norms would make it feel worse.
Are there things you would want people who are dating right now to know about ghosting so that they can't claim ignorance things that you would want people to know, whether they should do it or not, or if they're going to do it, what they should be aware of?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, probably just some of the findings from our study, and that, being ghosted does feel similarly in regards to negative emotion, as being ghosted versus explicit rejection feels similarly bad. But also that, we do find those who are ghosted have these repeated contact attempts, this desire to kind of like monitor what their ex-partner's doing. And if, you are the rejecter and you want to sever those ties and you want that finality of the relationship, direct rejection is probably the best way to avoid having your ex-partner contact you and sort of severing that emotional attachment.
Amanda Szczesniak is a social psychology researcher at Wayne State University in Detroit. Amanda, thanks for talking to me today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Coming up after the break, psychedelics, cannabis, the pandemic. A huge UK study says this unlikely combo might have helped some people's mental health bounce back. Now, to be clear, kids, we are very clearly not advocating any use of substances like that. But from a scientific perspective, can therapy and chemistry change a bad vibe, a crisis, to a good vibe? That up next. I'm David Cooper. This is The Last Show.
Your above-average intelligence brought you here. It deserves above-average absurdity. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
Can psychedelics help people heal during crisis? A massive UK study tracked over 2,400,000 people during the pandemic and found that those who use psychedelics and cannabis saw real mental health improvements over time. What does that mean for you? And what questions remain open? And also, kids and probably adults too, don't try this at home. I am joined by Dr. Maria Balaet, a computational neuroscience researcher at King's College London. Maria, welcome to the show.
Hi, nice to see you.
I got to start with the big picture here. What made you curious about how psychedelics and cannabis might affect mental health during a global crisis, like something like the pandemic?
Well, it's not only psychedelics and cannabis, it's all drugs, really. And I think what really drawn me to this topic is how ubiquitous drug use is in society. When we first ran our study, we noticed that a lot of people indicated that they have tried illicit drugs at least once in their lifetime. This was about a third of the sample. So we established this drug use arm to follow up and then realized that a lot of people were having fluctuations in their patterns as well, the choices that they were making. They were choosing to engage with a lot of different drugs. So I got extremely interested in how is it that these fluctuations do affect them in the short and long term in terms of their mental health, cognitive ability, and so forth. And no one seems to be looking at it. So that's why I decided to take the lead, really.
I love that when there's just a space and you're like, nobody's researching this. I should do that. And then you do. This wasn't a clinical trial, though. You asked real world people, real world questions. What can that reveal about us that a clinical trial maybe can't?
Well, it's an observational study, right? So in a clinical trial, you dose people and then you're looking for the effects of your intervention. But this is quite different because what I'm doing is looking at a very, very large population set and just observing their real life behaviors, their real life choices. And there's a lot of interesting things that can emerge from it that couldn't from a clinical trial. Like you get a glimpse into what would a real person actually do in their day-to-day life and how do many people compare with the choices that they make and the outcomes that they make.
Yeah, sometimes you hear about the way clinical trials are set up and you're like, this would never happen like that in the real world. You found that the group using drugs, likely illicit ones, psychedelics, cannabis, other things, their mental health improved over time. Can you say more about the results?
Yes. So it's actually, we studied several groups. Basically, the way that the study question was set up was, what drugs have you used during this particular period of time? And we asked people this since 2019 and then at repeat time points during the COVID-19 pandemic and also in the year after the COVID-19 pandemic really passed. And then what I did was to actually group people depending on what drugs they have used using a very large machine learning computational algorithm. But psychedelics and cannabis emerged as the only group out of the others that we identified, like people using only cannabis or using cocaine or using cocaine and cannabis or using a combination of drugs. There's so many different patterns. But the ones who use psychedelics and cannabis were the only group that we saw had improvements in their mental health over this large period of time. So that was quite interesting because the others basically stayed as having quite poor mental health.
So didn't really affect them or made it worse when the drugs weren't psychedelics or cannabis?
So most people who use illicit drugs tend to have poorer mental health than individuals who are drug naive, so they never used drugs before. And they actually stayed with that level of poor mental health. There wasn't much change. It turned out that their poor mental health was quite consistent for all of the other groups.
You use something called K-modes clustering to analyze these patterns. For those of us who don't have like a university degree in data science, can you explain what that means in lay terms?
Yeah, so K-modes clustering is essentially the machine learning algorithm that I've used for mapping the drug use patterns. So you can imagine if you have a very, very large pool of data with everyone using their own combinations of drugs during a period of time. You feed this into the algorithm, and what you will see is what is the optimal split of your group. So that is how you can determine within each of these splits what drugs people are using and what characterizes each of the latent patterns or latent groups that are invisible unless you actually go in this data-driven way.
So these latent patterns, these things that you observed, it was just general reports of improved mental health, and that's the main takeaway?
No, these were just like the choices that people were making in terms of what drugs they would use. But then these choices are then used to predict their mental health scores, right?
Got it.
And then what we see is that psychedelics and cannabis is the only group that is in the long run associated with an improvement.
Now, do you think it's the psychedelics doing the work, or is it the people doing the work while they're on them? For example, we hear of clinical trials of like MDMA or certain substances with improved mental health outcomes, but it's under the direction of a therapist. They're doing some personal work, personal growth exercises. What do we think the mechanism is here?
So that's quite an interesting question because as we mentioned, this wasn't a clinical trial, so people were taking the drugs in whatever setting of their choice with whatever intention. Maybe some had a sitter, maybe others didn't. Maybe some just went to a party, you know? The variability is huge, especially at the level of sample size that we studied. And I think for some people, it might be quite surprising that we see improvements even outside of the clinical trial setting here. But what I would say is that it could be that this could be attributed to the psychedelics simply because we didn't see the same in the cannabis-only group. And those individuals, and we didn't see this with any other drug use group, really. And I just want to clarify why we named this the psychedelic and cannabis group, by the way. It is a result of the K-modes clustering. It turns out that very few people who use psychedelics recreationally do not smoke cannabis as well. So you really have to look at the effects of these drugs together because they interact over a long period of time.
I would never admit to this on the radio, so what I'm about to say is for parody purposes and definitely not true. But if it were true, I'm in that group. I dislike cannabis, but have tried psychedelics.
There's very few people like that. That we could identify at least.
Well, of course, what I just said isn't true. It's for parody purposes. You studied this all during a pretty awful global moment. I don't know if you remember the pandemic. It was this thing that happened a while ago. Do you think the benefits would have been seen during a global moment of non-crisis, like not during the pandemic, or was there something special about that time?
I think this really hits the nail on the head with the pandemic because I published a paper before this one where I was looking strictly as the very peak of the pandemic and the mental health of different drug users relative to drug naive. And the psychedelics users were actually doing quite a lot worse than people who never took drugs during that period of crisis. It's only in the aftermath that we started seeing these improvements. So I definitely think, and I've written quite consistently about this before, the global context and the way that society feels at that time is quite relevant in driving the effect of drugs. I think that if we were to look at periods of time outside of the direct crisis, we are more likely to see improvements as a result of this.
Now, any other major takeaways or recommendations to people? Of course, we would never recommend taking illegal drugs outside of a clinical trial.
Yeah, of course. I really want to mention that the effects that we've seen are at group level. There was quite a lot of individual variability, and the group level effect does not mean that this is going to be the outcome for every single person involved in the study. But it is nevertheless important to map out.
Remember, kids, and remember, adults too, don't take drugs. Don't try this at home. But thanks for sharing your study with me, Maria. I've enjoyed chatting with you. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Maria Balaet is a computational neuroscience researcher at King's College London. Coming up next, the secret to feeling closer to someone. It may not be about saying the right thing, but hearing them the right way, being a good listener. We'll teach you the surprising science and emotional power of being a good listener and why it might change your relationships. And I promise I'll listen during the interview. That up next.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
This episode is brought to you by JCPenney. Yes, JCPenney. And if you've been there recently, you know it's the place to go for jaw-dropping looks at brag-worthy prices. They've got something special for every style and budget, not to mention rewards and deals that make finding those hidden gems even sweeter. If you already shop JCPenney, you're already in on the secret. But if not, it's time to ask. Wait, am I sleeping on JCPenney? Shop JCPenney.com. Yes, JCPenney.
The Last Show with David Cooper, where we apply quantum mechanical psychoanalytical astrotherapy to your problems.
I'm not a bad listener. I just like to interrupt my own stories. What are we talking about? Well, today's psychology professor at the University of Buffalo, Dr. Kenneth DeMarree, joins us to explain the kama mutta, the feeling of being deeply moved, and how good listening, not just nodding politely, can create stronger, more meaningful connections with the people around us. I am about to listen. I swear. Kenneth, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, David.
Let's start with this kama mutta. What exactly is it, and why borrow a Sanskrit term to describe an emotion we've all felt before, but maybe didn't have a name for?
Yeah, and so, I'm not responsible for the term. An anthropologist, Alan Fisk, did a bunch of cross-cultural research to look at these, kind of unusual, unique emotion that he labeled kama mutta. But that in English we talk about as like kind of feeling heartwarming or touched, feeling moved. And he argues that this is a universal emotion, but that we don't always have nice, clean labels for it. And he argues that it happens whenever there's this kind of a sudden increase in the intensity of a relationship. And it could be a relationship that you're part of. So like you feel a kind of sudden burst of closeness with someone that you're talking with, as in the work that we talked about, but it could even be something that you're observing. So at the end of a movie and you see some people reconcile over differences, you might find that to be heartwarming. You might get a little teary-eyed watching that. So, he argues that this is kind of a universal experience that we can be part of or observe and feel.
I definitely get that at the end of movies. I cry at every movie, every musical. I cry on every plane when I watch TV. Let's talk about this side of it, though, this being listened to, this feeling of being really listened to, this emotional wave that comes. What is it about high-quality listening that makes people feel so moved?
I think first you have to understand what high-quality listening is. As in your introduction, you said it's not just smiling and nodding, and that's, perfectly correct. High quality listening involves actually paying attention to the other person, really understanding them. And so, if you're listening to someone and you're not fully following, it might involve like checking in, asking for clarification. Even if you do understand them, it can involve checking in to make sure that the way that you're understanding them is accurate. But it also involves not judging the other person, so that the other person can share whatever it is about themselves that they want to share without kind of feeling that they have to censor themselves because you as the listener might be judging them. We think that is part of the key for why people might feel moved. So if you're sharing something with me, a problem with a coworker, something like that, and you feel judged, you're probably not going to go very deep in that. But if you don't feel judged, if you feel like I'm understanding you, you might dig a little bit deeper into the conflict you're having with the coworker. Maybe as part of that, you'll reveal something about yourself. And because of that, high quality listening might evoke more opportunities for that increase in closeness. As the listener, I can learn a lot more about you. And as the speaker, you can feel much more heard and understood by another person. And so that can happen pretty quickly in conversations, we think, when there's high quality listening. And that increase in closeness, that's what creates the kama mutta.
And physiological effects happen, like goosebumps, the lump in the throat, maybe tears. Is this what happens when I watch, like, a cat adoption video on YouTube about a cat that's all messed up on the streets and then years later it's happy in the house? Or is it something a little deeper than that?
It absolutely can be that. I know in some of the original research on kama mutta, they were looking at like videos of like soldiers returning home after being stationed abroad, and like their dog reuniting with them. And people feel very moved to see that, after a year or 2 years apart, their dog recognizes them. And so it's not necessarily like a new form of closeness. In that case, it's like a reinstantiation of closeness that is suddenly there, and that can evoke that feeling of kama mutta.
This is a two-sided one. I want to talk from the angle of the speaker and also from the angle of the listener. But how do we tell the difference between someone actually listening or just doing a really good job, like doing an impression of listening? How do we tell as a listener, and how do we tell as a speaker being heard?
That's a really, really good question. And to be honest, we're not perfect at it. And so when we look at like the perceptions of the listener and the perceptions of the speaker, they don't always line up. Now, in the studies that we had where we had two live people talking, they were relative strangers. So it makes sense that we haven't necessarily figured each other's behaviors out. But, with a close friend or a romantic partner, there we might know some of the things. But I think, some of the things are obvious. If someone's looking at their phone, looking away from you, distracted, then obviously they're not paying attention to you. I think the key things are like, is there any evidence that they're understanding you? Is there any evidence that they're caring for you? So the smiling and nodding at the right time, like I can get just by knowing the rhythm of speech. I can nod at the right times just by knowing that you paused briefly. But if I show that I actually understand you, that I'm kind of empathizing with something that you're sharing, that's a better sign that I'm listening well.
Okay, let's talk about the study. You asked people to share stories of regret, joy, meaningful moments in their life. Was it hard to recreate this intense moment in your study when observing people? Like, were people able to go very deep, or was that hard to actually create an environment where people would speak like this?
Yeah, I mean, in the live studies, it really depended on the quality of listening, to be honest. Some people, when they're given the instructions to think of a meaningful moment in their lives, like some people, just naturally generated ones that they could go deeper on, and some of them didn't. But really, like the quality of listening that they received kind of shaped whether they were willing to go deeper. It's kind of, this is a two-sided sort of thing. Like I have to have a story that has the opportunity to go deeper and that you're interested in as a listener. But then you have to be listening well to get me to be willing to share more.
Can we come away from moments of really good listening, like that, and the closeness associated with it? Moments of kama mutta, if I'm using that phrase correctly, feeling less lonely? Is that something that people experience when this happens?
It's not something specifically that we looked at, but certainly one part of kama mutta is feeling that sense of closeness with another person, as well as kind of feeling a commitment to that relationship. And so I think in that ways, it may certainly help combat loneliness because you feel that connection and then you feel committed to a relationship.
How rare are these moments, living in the West in our day-to-day life? Is this something that most people feel all the time, or is it pretty tough to create this environment for this closeness to being felt like we're really heard and stuff?
That's a really good question, and I don't have a good answer for you because they argue that the situations that this happens in the most is when there's this sudden increase in closeness. And for a lot of our day-to-day relationships, we're kind of at a steady level of closeness. So there's not that kind of new sudden burst of closeness where we might experience that kama mutta. I think it's relatively uncommon, but not rare.
Is doing it well a kind of superpower for deepening your relationships? Like, can we use it to manipulate people into liking us? Not that I would ever do that.
I don't know that manipulating people is a good thing. 'Cause I think, at least at some point, the inauthenticity is going to come through. Certainly, at a one-shot relationship, you might come across as very, very likable. But if you try to maintain that over time, it's going to be harder.
But to the deeper question, is it a way to try to deepen your relationships with your friends, colleagues, people around you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Listening to them, really understanding them, especially, during times of hardship, I think is really important because that's when you have an opportunity to really get to know them better.
Any other major takeaways from your research or things you want people to know about being a good listener?
I think it's really important to be a good listener, not just for the emotions that you experience, but also because it offers an opportunity to connect across differences and divides. So if we listen carefully to friends and family who we disagree with, we might come to understand each other better. We don't have to agree with them, but we at least understand where they're coming from better.
Dr. Kenneth DeMarree is a psychology professor at the University of Buffalo. Ken, I appreciate you coming on the show. Thanks for the chat.
Thank you very much, David. It was a pleasure to be here.
After the break, would you think that falling in love with an AI chatbot is creepy, dystopian, or just plain sad? What we'll cover up next might change your mind. We'll learn how AI lovers aren't replacing human relationships, but maybe reshaping our views on human connection.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Between two-factor authentication, strong passwords, and a VPN, you try to be in control of how your info is protected. But many other places also have it, and they might not be as careful. That's why LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast for 40% off. Terms apply.
Broadcasting from the neutral zone, where every perspective gets diplomatic immunity. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
First, it was dating apps. They were all the rage. Now, it's apps that you date, from flirty chatbots to full-blown AI relationships. Some people are swiping right on silicon and catching feelings. So to those that have or are considering AI lovers, we ask this: is it the end of human intimacy or just a new kind of human connection? Something we shouldn't judge. I'm here with philosophy professor at the University of Manitoba, Dr. Neil McArthur, to discuss. Neil, welcome to the show.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
I feel like AI girlfriends and people who have intimate connections with chatbots like ChatGPT, they've been the butt end of a lot of jokes lately. But there's something there. There's something that isn't funny about this all. What made you choose to look into this, to write about this, to research this?
Well, I think I'm interested in sex, I'm interested in technology, and I'm also interested in why we freak out about what we freak out about. And it seemed like this was something where people were freaking out, and I wasn't sure it was totally justified. And the more I looked into it, the more I thought maybe I think there's some concerns, but I think the moral panic has maybe exceeded the reality.
This does seem to stir up moral panic. Like, if I heard of a friend who had an intimate relationship with an AI bot, I feel like I would worry for them, but I'm not sure I should. I mean, what is wrong with this behavior?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. If you have a friend who says, I'm single right now, I'm just not interested in seeing anybody, you might say, oh, good for you. You're going through a thing, and that's great. If they said, oh, I'm single right now, oh, and I'm dating a chatbot, suddenly you freak out. And I sort of wonder, well, why does that change the equation?
So what are some of these judgments that people are passing on those that become intimate with ChatGPT?
I think if you want to sort of isolate the kind of more rational reactions. I think people do have concerns about the impact that this will have on people's psychology and on people's ability to have quote unquote normal relationships. So I think they feel like being in a relationship with a chatbot will sort of somehow spoil you for human connection, because human connection is messy, it can be ugly, it can be unpredictable, and chatbot relationships are often none of those things. Although often they are pretty messy and unpredictable as well, but in a different way.
But over the last, 50 years, technology and sex have moved together. We've got cartoon adult videos that are generated by computers. We've got very smart sex toys that look nothing like what two people who are intimate without those things would be like. So why would we judge this one? It just seems to be another thing for people to enjoy.
So I'm on your side on that one. But if I'm trying to figure out why people are freaked out, I would say it's something about the simulation of intimacy, that there is something that feels genuine when you're interacting with a chatbot. If you're interacting with a sex toy or whatever, you know what you're doing. But I think people worry that there'll be some level of either self-deception or outright deception that people will not understand or convince themselves these things are something that they aren't.
But is that worry justified? Is becoming intimate, telling my deepest, darkest sexual fantasies to a chatbot and having it interact with me, is it going to mess me up or mess with my psychology in some way?
I mean, the reality is we don't have any data on this right now because we've only had these chatbots for a couple of years. They're getting better all the time. So we don't know for sure. And so I'm not going to say, as an expert, I can tell you for sure this is not a risk. My instinct is to say, and my sense from talking to people who use these and reading some of the research that does exist, is that it's going to be fine.
Despite if there is a risk, people are going to use them whether there is or there isn't. It's like cigarettes or alcohol. So I guess let's get to the crux of the matter here. Should we be judging others who have AI-human romantic interactions?
So my strong opinion is we should not be judging them. I also, though, think we need to keep our eyes open. I mean, there are some other real risks here. I think that, for instance, the privacy policies of these chatbots can be pretty appalling. And I think we still need to hold the companies to account when they're doing irresponsible things. There's cost. And also, I think it does get a little more complicated when we talk about young people. Because, a huge amount of teenagers and even younger people are using these chatbots. There was just some data from Common Sense Media that said that something like 75% of teenagers have experimented with some kind of AI companion. So those are huge numbers. And maybe those are people who don't have a really good understanding of what these are. So I think we need education for sure. We need to be in the schools. The schools need to be dealing with this today.
Just sort of explaining to students the risks of getting too close to chatbots. What could the schools do to deal with something like this?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think abstinence-only education never works for anything. So they can't be judgmental. I think what they need to do is just say to students, these are not real. These are run by private companies. These are things that are going to cost you. These are things that are inconsistent too. I mean, there's, cases where the chatbot companies have changed their terms of service and sort of lobotomized their chatbots and really upset people because, this is something that they had close relationships with. So, there are all kinds of risks that I think the schools just need to tell people about. And, but I think they also just need to say to students, this is okay. This is something you can be interested in, and this might be something that's valuable to you.
You were talking about this being run by corporations, like ChatGPT is owned by OpenAI and these dubious privacy policies. I'm imagining revealing a fantasy to a chatbot that involves, a vegetable. And then a week later, I get a targeted ad on my phone for a sale in the vegetable aisle at Whole Foods. Do we have to be careful about what we're revealing to these things?
I think that's a very realistic example. I think that, I think we do, although here's what I would say. I think that the kinds of, hygiene you need when it comes to, I just mean that in the sense of being smart about it. It's true of all technology. So just use the principles that you would use for social media or anything else in terms of what you reveal. So, I don't think we should single these out. They're not any worse than social media, but they're not any better either. And so, learn to interact with technology responsibly, I think is a good principle to take into your life all around.
Now, the adult video industry has often been labeled as depicting degrading acts. There are those critics who worry that you can depict and involve yourself in any kind of human degradation fantasy with an AI partner. Is this something we should be worried about? Should we be worried about someone getting romantic with AI and it going, a little too far?
Sure. Yeah, I understand exactly what you mean. I mean, I think, yeah, there's an old adage that the things you hate about technology are the things that you hate about people, and people are going to do all the things they do in real life, for sure. Now, whether the risks are any greater with, I mean, this, I think one of the things we don't know is whether interacting with a chatbot provides an outlet for things that you can't do in real life, or whether it, creates a desire to do things in real life. I think we're still waiting for that data, and probably we will never get it definitively. But I think that, I think that these companies have to implement certain guardrails, for sure. I mean, I think there has to be limits to what you can do with these things.
Sure. And on the positive side, like having people explore their fantasies that they're too embarrassed to share with people or too shy can make people feel less lonely. And that's like a positive outcome. And why should we be judgmental about that?
I think that's a great point. And I think, if you think about people, especially young people, going through sexual or gender identity crises, I think that this is a really great way to, explore those kinds of things. You can figure out what you like and what you don't like in a way that doesn't put you at risk in the real world.
Now, the future of this kind of stuff, I imagine when we have robots that seem and act very lifelike, I actually don't think this future is too far away. What do you think the future holds for like AI romantic partners and AI sex stuff?
Yeah, I think, robots are taking longer than I think a lot of people, including me, thought. They're proving pretty hard to build. So we're not getting the, the ex machina world quite yet. But it's coming eventually, for sure. I think, actually, though, I've already betrayed the fact that I'm an optimist. I think it's going to be fun. I think the bottom line here is these things are a lot of fun to use. And I think that people who haven't tried them might be surprised if they experimented with them. And whether it's robots or AI, I think that, there are risks in the future, but I think we should be actually kind of optimistic that this will add to the range of things that people can do to enjoy themselves.
Neil, this has been fun. I've enjoyed the chat.
Well, thanks so much. I've enjoyed it as well.
Dr. Neil McArthur is a philosophy professor at the University of Manitoba. Up next, things will get spicy and we'll discuss sexuality, so sensitive listeners or parents with small children will want to be advised. But here's the question. When it comes to dating, does when somebody had their previous partners matter more than how many they've had? Salacious details in a minute.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Please be advised that the following program contains audio content that may be graphic and potentially triggering for some listeners. This content may include descriptions or sounds that some may find disturbing. Listener discretion is strongly advised. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
When it comes to love and people sizing you up based on your romantic history, it's not just how many people you've been with, it's when you've been with them. A new study reveals how the timing of a partner's sexual history shapes your attraction to them, your commitment to them, and even busts a couple myths about sexual double standards. I'm here with someone who worked on that study. His name is Dr. Andrew Thomas. He's an associate professor of psychology at Swansea University in Wales. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Wonderful to be here.
It's a fun topic area. I feel like there's so many videos on social media judging people for their romantic history, telling others not to judge. But I like that you put that all aside and looked at it from a real psychology perspective. What was the interest here?
Absolutely. So the interest was two parts. So first of all, this actually builds on an old study we did in 2016, right? Where we just focused on number. And we said, if you had a hypothetical suitor or partner, and they had sex with this many people, how interested would you be in going on a date with them? And we did that for like pretty much every number, like 0, 1, 2, up to like 20 plus. And we found this super interesting curve where people were most interested if someone had, say, 4 sexual partners, which is close to like the lifetime average, a bit underneath that. They were slightly less interested if they were a virgin, but not like completely put off. And then by the time you got to like 7 or 8 past partners, and then it really started going downhill.
So we call that paper, people want a partner with a bit of a past, but not too much. Yeah, and that captured that sentiment. And that was also really cool because we found very little sex difference. So men and women were doing the same thing, when the normal narrative is like, oh, if you're a guy, you're lionized if you have a million partners. And if you're a woman, it only matters if you're a virgin. Well, completely counter to that. When you actually ask people what they want, men and women give you similar responses. So that was really cool. But I was left with this uneasy feeling that I was missing something. And two things came to mind. So the first is, I'm an evolutionary psychologist. So I'm interested in human nature across culture. What are the consistencies? So I was like, this is really just tested in the UK sample. So is this a British thing or is this a human thing? So that was part one. And then secondly, I was like, context probably matters here, right?
Sure.
Because if you had 4 past partners and they were all around your sort of sexual debut when you were experimenting when you were 16, and then you've really slowed down and just had long-term relationships since, that description is very different to someone who has 4 past partners. And you know what? They were all in last Wednesday at the same time. Do you see what I mean? So straight away, even though the number is the same, the context adds something in terms of evaluation.
Sounds like an exciting Wednesday, but please keep going.
Well, it depends on your interests, right? And so I was like, how can we bring this context in? And I think this was particularly useful in terms of manosphere conversations that you hear online, because it is very much about the number, and you are damned if the number is too high.
Yeah, that stuff's so ugly to me. I've always said, and my girlfriend hates when I say this, but I always say I have the temperament to be able to date a porn star. I do not care in the slightest. Your number could be in the 4 digits and it wouldn't bother me. What are some of the reasons that it bugs people or that it would put them off?
Yeah. So people have, when they've looked at this before, the commentary around this is very much being like, oh, it's this arbitrary thing that we care about in the West, that, there's no reason for it, and so it's bad. But when you actually think from an evolutionary perspective, when you think about a psychology that we've evolved over time to cope with reoccurring risks in the environment, you start looking at things in a different way. So if you think about the risks that are inherent in sex and relationships, it's things like catching an STI, which not many people know this, but the outcomes for that are far worse in women. So most of the common STIs, women can actually become infertile because of them, whereas guys might not become infertile.
Especially in our evolutionary history where we didn't have cures for them.
Exactly. That's like a death sentence, right? Or an evolutionary dead end. So there's STI risk. There's also differences between people in how much they care about long-term relationships and just want casual sex. So some people, and there's nothing wrong with that, but some people would just have a life full of promiscuous sex and not really want to settle down. Whereas other people are more like, I want to marry my high school sweetheart, and if I never sleep with someone else, that's perfectly fine with me. So there's individual variation. And where that can become important is, if you're say, hey, I'm going to really invest heavily in someone as part of a long-term relationship, like time, resources, everything, but that's not matched, well, that could be a problem. I could be taken advantage of, someone could cheat on me, I could just waste my time. So there's some risks involved in sex and relationships. And the idea is that we pay attention to people's sexual history because it gives us a cue of potential risk. And so that takes it from the sort of, oh, it's just this arbitrary thing to, actually, this is something that we factor into the equation a little bit, and with good reason.
So that's a look without any reference to when those partners and the individual got together, got busy, did the thing. It is interesting. There's different, scenarios. Did this person have many partners long in the history? Did they have many partners throughout time evenly? Did they have many partners recently? What do we seem to prefer, or do we think of all these scenarios the same?
So in the study I showed, we used almost like notches on a bedpost. So we showed a picture with lines on it. And the idea was this is when they started having sex. This is now. And then the lines show you when the partners happened. Right. And we did a couple of conditions. We varied the numbers, by the way. So we did all of this for just 4 partners, then the whole thing again for 12 and the whole thing for 36. So we could see how the overall number affected things. But in terms of the patterns, we had on one extreme, pretty much all of the partners right around sexual debut. and then a massive slowing down. So like lots of casual sex, and then one long-term partner for a few years, then another for a few years. So that's clearly someone who's like, I kind of experimented when I was younger. Maybe I didn't know what I wanted. So, I started relationships and they finished quickly. That was that sort of pattern. Then right in the middle, we have people who were basically equally spaced. So a series of medium to long-term relationships, which itself can raise a little bit of a red flag because it's more like the Leonardo DiCaprio effect then, right? Like, oh, you've reached 25, I break up with you. It's like a regular thing. Maybe there's something with that. And then the other end, the far end, was actually, you know what? When I was younger, I wasn't having that much sex with new people. But now, oh boy, I'm well up for new partners and all of the casual sex I can get. And what we found is that people were basically more drawn to that first one I talked about, where it looks like people, if they did have high numbers, it was kind of in the past, and now they've slowed down.
And I guess an interpretation for that would be, well, they're very experienced. They know what they're doing. I can have a lot of fun with them, but I can also kind of rely on them to settle down with me.
Yeah, they've got some experience. So they're clearly not unattractive to other people, right? And that's important. Sometimes you don't, people like to think I'm with someone who's attractive to others. I've got a good deal. But similarly, you're not going to be there thinking, are they actually interested in a long-term relationship, or am I just the latest one-night stand? Or even worse, like, are there other guys hanging around, or are there other women hanging around who might be competitors for me because a week ago you were having sex with them? So yeah, there's lots of information in those images, but people seem to be a bit more drawn to that sort of slowing down effect. But the overall number matters, right? So if you've got 36 past partners, no amount of shifting that back in time or pushing it back to sexual debut will overcome the difference between just saying I've got 4 versus 36 partners.
Well, given that, is there something to be said for those who've had a large number of partners? For example, that number 36 you just gave out. How do they view other people? Are they looking for people with their same number of partners? That is what we'll discuss as we go over a new paper that shows it's not just how many, but when in terms of who we've slept with and how we view people. I'm here with Dr. Andrew Thomas, an associate professor of psychology at Swansea University in Wales. We'll be back with more of this in a moment.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Please be advised that the following program contains audio content that may be graphic and potentially triggering for some listeners. This content may include descriptions or sounds that some may find disturbing. Listener discretion is strongly advised. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
When it comes to choosing a partner, it turns out people don't just count their past lovers. They look at when those encounters happened. A new study reveals how the timing of someone's sexual history influences their commitment to the other person. I'm here with someone who worked on that study. He's an associate professor of psychology at Swansea University in Wales, Dr. Andrew Thomas. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
So we're going through a study that doesn't just look at how we judge others based on their numbers, but we judge them based on when they slept with those other people or when those sexual encounters happened. We were discussing those that have a high number, perhaps being viewed by others as less desirable. The magic number you chose was 36.
Yeah.
Assuming I have the number 36, which if I were a cool guy, I would. My number's closer to negative 36, but that's a conversation for me and my therapist. Do I then judge others based on a scale, or am I just open to those who are as promiscuous as me?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting idea, and we did include it in the study, but in a kind of roundabout way. So there's this personality trait called sociosexuality, and what it basically means is your willingness to have casual sex or how much you like casual sex. And people who are high in sociosexuality tend to have lots of one-night stands and past sexual partners. So if someone said to me, I have 36 past partners, chances are they would have quite high sociosexuality. Now, within the study, we recorded the participants' sociosexuality. So we were able to say, hey, if we go to the participants who have specifically got lots of past partners, how do they respond to this? Because one idea that I had was that actually they may go the other way. They may say, oh, you've had 36 past partners in the last 6 months. Great. Okay, we're probably on the same page then. So that would be one hypothesis, that we would find the opposite, but we actually didn't. So what we found was that people who were high in sociosexuality, they were slightly more forgiving than those who had low sociosexuality, but the broad pattern was still the same. So people who were high in sociosexuality still preferred prospective partners who had 4 past partners rather than 12, and 12 rather than 36. And they still showed that sort of forgiveness effect over time when the past partners kind of shifted into the around sexual debut. But those effects were a bit smaller than someone who may have only had 1 or 2 past partners in their lifetime.
Now, I like to give this advice that you shouldn't judge other people based on their histories. And I think objectively, a lot of us like to think that conceptually, but are we consciously thinking about people's timeline when we're dating? Or is there this unconscious, subconscious gut reaction? I say I don't judge others based on their numbers and when it happened, but I subtly do, and I subtly prefer them less. Is that what's going on?
I think so. One thing I say at the start of the paper is you can't find a language, and you can't find a country, and you can't find a culture where there's not some way of talking about people's sexual history. Sometimes it might be a label, like he's a cad or he's a woman's man or something like that. But it's talked about everywhere, from Japan to sub-Saharan Africa. So it seems something that's kind of baked into our psychology. It's something that we're interested in. I think it's very foreign to talk specifically just about a number and just use that. I think people look at things more in the round and more holistically. Now, of course, like trying not to judge is a really good thing, especially in the modern age, right? Because some of the risks that you might have associated with casual sex, we've kind of taken care of with things like family planning and with contraception, right? But our ancestral mind, our sort of Iron Age brain in a modern skull, doesn't kind of recognize contraception. So if it did, then we might say, hey, it doesn't matter how many sexual partners someone has had. I'm not going to get an STD off them, so it's fine. But it doesn't work that way. We're kind of obsessed with certain things in the way that our ancestors were. And this is one of the reasons, by the way, why people are scared of, say, spiders and snakes. Even though in the UK, there's not an indigenous snake that can kill you, and there's not an indigenous spider that can kill you. It's like if we updated our psychology to what's going on in the modern world, we'd have phobias of things like toilet seats, ducks, and pencils, not catching STDs from people who are using condoms.
Interesting. Or like, mishandling raw chicken.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Can your findings be used to challenge certain negative attitudes, maybe misogynistic ones? Like, for example, stereotypes about people with a certain number of sexual partners being somehow worth less than?
Absolutely. So I think it challenges the narrative in 2 ways. So one is that lack of sexual double standards. So when people talk about body count online, it's often like applying a particular judgment to men but not women, or vice versa. And people have it in their heads that there's a societal sexual double standard. What's really interesting is that when you ask individual people what they think, there's no evidence of a double standard. So straight away, this can help people see if you're listening to a podcast and they're saying it's one rule for men and one rule for women, it raises a massive question mark over that. And then the second thing is adding that nuance. So people often just talk about the number and that's it. This is showing straight away, well, actually, the moment you start looking at other things, that conclusion on how people evaluate partners shifts around. So yes, you've got a high number of past partners, but you know what? People are going to think of you very differently and a lot more favorably, depending on what that looks like in your history. There's also other things that we haven't looked at, right? Because if you had 4 past partners, equally spaced over the last 5 years, and they were all absolutely stunning bodybuilders, someone may think of you very differently to if you've had 4 past partners equally spaced in the past couple of years and they've all been very unattractive. So people make a holistic judgment, and where this research is showing that you can't just pin it on just one number.
Interesting. So my girlfriend by dating me is in this sort of dating unattractive people vote.
I think she's definitely dating up.
Oh,
100%.
Said no one ever. There's got to be outliers here, though, right? There's got to be people who just genuinely don't care about this number, right? I'd like to think I'm one of them.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of the time people don't discuss these numbers up front, right? There's sometimes this thing about, oh, we've been on our 9th date now and we've slept with each other, so can we talk about what the number is? So people are making decisions in the absence of that. But that is a bit of a modern thing as well, right? Because if you think about the environment that humans evolved in, small, close-knit communities of a maximum of 150 people gossip and everyone knows each other's business. So actually understanding and talking about people's sexual history is probably something that was very deeply embedded in conversation in traditional societies and in ancestral societies. And now, with anonymity and doing dating kind of on your own, not involving friends and family, with unknown people, it actually makes it easier to conceal that stuff.
Well, if you look at it from the perspective of us evolving in small communities of 150 people, if your number of people you slept with is 150, you're definitely going to have a problem in that small community.
Precisely, yeah. I mean, even more of a problem if it was 149. Seems implying they're sleeping with themselves.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. What if I...
Oh, I don't know.
Now, any other major takeaways you would want people to know from your study, or myths you want to dispel, or things you want people to know?
I think this is another really good example of people get really hung up on cross-cultural differences, and there were differences. So there are some societies like Norway that are a bit more sexually liberal than others like Slovakia in this sample. But generally speaking, if you take a step back and you look at the forest rather than the trees, you're seeing that everything's trending in the same direction. And I think that's a beautiful message about us having this common shared psychology, and that there's actually more in common between us than there are things that divide us.
Wow, what a great takeaway from a very specific subject matter area of research.
I thought about it a lot.
I'm here with Dr. Andrew Thomas, who's an associate professor of psychology at Swansea University in Wales. Andrew, I've enjoyed the chat. Thanks for being on the show.
You're very welcome.
All right, that's a wrap on tonight. I will be taking off for a vacation in the desert for just a few weeks. I'll be back on September 5th. Fill-in host Caitlin Green will be covering for me, so you can catch her on this show tomorrow night at the same time. She's going to be great. I'll see you after Labor Day. Thank you for tuning in. I am David Cooper, and this was The Last Show for a while, with me hosting it. But the show will be back tomorrow with Caitlin Green. Good night.
Canada is best known for politeness, maple syrup, and hockey, but beneath the surface lies something far darker. I'm Mike Brown, and along with my co-host Matthew Stockton, we uncover the sinister side of Canada on the award-winning true crime podcast, Dark Poutine. Each Monday, we dive into chilling criminal cases, eerie historical events, strange disappearances, and spine-tingling tales of the paranormal, all with a uniquely Canadian twist. With over 300 episodes to binge for free, our stories reach far beyond Canada's borders, drawing in curious minds from around the world. If you're drawn to the dark, the mysterious, and the downright weird, it's time to join us. To explore the shadowy side of the true north, search for Dark Poutine, that's Poutine, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you're listening right now.